What happens when it's freezing cold at night and you have no fire? Most people would die. Yet the Inuit have stayed warm in Arctic nights for thousands of years, sometimes even without flames. They figured out tricks so smart that they can sleep comfortably even when it's cold. One of these tricks? Using frozen water to stay warm. At first glance, building a shelter out of snow to stay warm sounds about as logical as making a boat out of Swiss cheese. It seems completely backwards. Snow is frozen water. Frozen things are cold. Cold things make us cold. So how on earth does an igloo work? The secret lies in snow's surprising properties as an insulator. When snow falls, it contains lots of tiny air pockets trapped between the ice crystals. These air pockets are what make snow feel fluffy when it's fresh, and they're also what gives snow its insulating superpowers. Air is actually a terrible conductor of heat, which means it's excellent at preventing heat transfer. This is where the igloo becomes a masterpiece of engineering. When built properly, the packed snow blocks form walls with millions of these tiny air pockets. The dome shape isn't just for structural stability, it also creates an efficient space where warm air from human bodies rises to the top and circulates rather than escaping. The temperature difference between the inside and outside of a well-built igloo can be staggering. While the Arctic air might howl at minus 40 degrees outside, that magical temperature where Fahrenheit and Celsius briefly agree, the interior of an occupied igloo can reach a positively balmy 40 degrees Fahrenheit. That's an 80-degree temperature difference through walls made of frozen water. But there's more to igloo design than just packing snow. The entrance is a crucial element, typically built lower than the sleeping platform inside. Cold air is heavier than warm air, so the sunken entrance acts as a cold air trap. The cold stays low and outside, while the warmth stays high and inside. It's like having a moat around your thermal castle. Inside, the igloo has distinct temperature zones. The sleeping platform is raised, putting occupants in the warmest layer of air. The highest point of the dome might even get warm enough to cause slight melting, which is actually beneficial. As this thin layer refreezes, it creates a more windproof seal. Building an igloo isn't just throwing snow together either. The blocks are carefully cut and arranged in a spiral pattern, with each row leaning slightly inward until they meet at the top. This creates a self-supporting structure that gets stronger as it settles. Snow that's been cut and packed properly will actually strengthen over time as the outer layer is exposed to the daily freeze-thaw cycle. The tools for building remain elegantly simple. Traditionally, a snow knife made from bone or ivory was all that was needed. The knife is used to cut blocks from compressed snow, test the snow's quality, and smooth interior surfaces. A skilled igloo builder can construct a basic emergency shelter in under an hour, though a proper family dwelling might take closer to 5 hours to complete. Many people make the mistake of thinking an igloo feels like being inside a freezer. It doesn't, unless you've built it wrong. A properly built igloo is surprisingly comfortable. The snow walls absorb sound, creating a peaceful sanctuary from howling winds. The diffused light that penetrates the snow walls creates a gentle ambient glow during daylight hours. Ventilation is carefully managed too. A small hole at the top allows just enough air exchange without losing too much heat. Without this, an occupied igloo would actually become dangerously stuffy as oxygen decreases and carbon dioxide increases. This tiny detail shows just how refined this seemingly simple technology truly is. For longer stays, the interior walls might be lined with animal skins, adding another layer of insulation while preventing any drips from the ceiling if it gets too warm inside. Every aspect serves both practical function and comfort. Modern material science has yet to create anything that matches the igloo's elegant use of locally available materials. Imagine arriving in a barren landscape with nothing but snow and being able to transform it into a shelter that can keep you alive in the most extreme conditions on Earth. No wonder this design has endured for thousands of years. The igloo stands as a testament to human ingenuity in harsh environments, but shelter is just one piece of the survival puzzle. After mastering shelter design, the Inuit turned their attention to what covers the body itself. Their clothing represents thousands of years of trial and error, resulting in a system so effective that modern technology still struggles to match it. Cotton kills. This blunt statement isn't meant to shock, it's a life-saving warning. When cotton gets wet from sweat or snow, it loses all insulating properties and draws heat away from your body at an alarming rate. In Arctic conditions, this heat loss can be fatal within hours. The material stays wet for ages, turning what should protect you into your biggest threat. Even today, with all our advanced fabrics, this simple fact claims the lives of unprepared wilderness travelers every year. Traditional Arctic clothing offers a much smarter approach. The layering method emerged from necessity, not as a marketing gimmick from outdoor retailers charging small fortunes for something the Inuit perfected centuries ago. Their system relies on specific materials with unique properties that work together as a complete temperature regulation system. At the heart of winter clothing lies caribou fur, nature's supreme insulator. The secret lies in its structure. Each caribou hair is hollow, creating microscopic air chambers that trap warmth with astonishing efficiency, approximately 10 times better than sheep's wool. A single caribou fur garment contains millions of these tiny heat reservoirs. Beyond trapping warmth, the fur naturally repels moisture, ensuring it maintains its insulating properties even in challenging conditions. The classic winter outfit uses 2 caribou fur layers arranged strategically. Inner layer with fur facing inward against the skin. Outer layer with fur facing outward. Between these layers forms a heat-trapping zone with minimal air movement. While the inner layer moves moisture away from the body, the outer layer stands guard against wind and snow, a complete environmental management system made entirely of natural materials. The design shows equally impressive attention to detail. The original parka, a word borrowed from Inuit language, employs a pullover design instead of front openings that create vulnerable heat escape routes. The hood creates a protected microclimate for the face, often finished with wolverine or wolf fur ruff that remains frost-free even when exposed to warm breath in freezing temperatures. Every element serves multiple functions simultaneously. The golden rule of Arctic dressing contradicts what most people assume about staying warm: never sweat. This seems counterintuitive. Isn't being warm enough to sweat the goal? Absolutely not, in extreme cold. Sweat creates moisture against the skin that will eventually cool, turning into the equivalent of strapping ice packs all over your body. Arctic veterans monitor their exertion levels carefully, removing layers during activity and immediately adding them back when stopping. Being slightly cool during movement is far safer than being warm enough to perspire. Smart design extends to gender-specific adaptations. Women's garments feature expanded hoods and shoulder areas to accommodate carrying children, creating a shared warming system between mother and child. Men's clothing allows greater arm mobility for hunting activities without exposing the core to cold air. Both styles extend well below the waist, effectively sealing the warm air around the torso from escaping upward like heat through a chimney. Footwear technology deserves particular attention. While expensive modern boots might perform adequately for casual use, traditional sealskin boots stand superior for active movement in extreme cold. Made with waterproof sealskin soles and caribou uppers extending to knee height, these boots incorporate surprising biomechanical wisdom. The flexible sole design permits natural foot movement, activating muscles that generate circulation and heat. Unlike rigid modern boots that can lead to cold, inactive feet despite thick insulation. Inside these remarkable boots lies another innovation: dried grass insoles forming a replaceable moisture control system. During the day, this grass wicks away foot sweat. At night, users remove the insoles to dry by body heat in sleeping areas. The grass structure traps additional air for insulation while naturally eliminating odors, unlike synthetic liners that eventually become permanently smelly regardless of cleaning. For hand protection, mittens trump gloves every time. The mitten design keeps fingers together, allowing them to share warmth instead of facing the cold as isolated units. Clever palm sections can open temporarily while keeping the back of the hand protected, providing brief dexterity for tasks without surrendering all hand warmth to the elements. The entire outfit functions as an integrated system. No single piece provides survival alone. Fit precision matters enormously. Too tight compresses insulating air layers and restricts blood flow. Too loose allows excessive air exchange that carries away body heat. The ideal garment breathes enough to prevent moisture accumulation while maintaining critical heat retention. Construction methods reveal further sophistication. Traditional garments use sinew thread that naturally expands when damp, sealing stitch holes against wind infiltration. Modern synthetic threads create thousands of microscopic air leaks at every stitch point. Seemingly trivial until you face negative 40-degree temperatures where such small details determine survival. This clothing system allows movement and life in conditions where exposed skin freezes solid in under 1 minute. But what happens during rest periods? The challenge of Arctic sleeping arrangements makes our fussing over mattress firmness seem trivial. When the ground beneath you is frozen solid and temperatures plummet to unimaginable lows, sleep becomes not just a matter of comfort, but survival. The Inuit developed sleeping systems that transform what should be a deadly situation into a restful night. First and foremost, never ever sleep directly on ice or frozen ground. This seems obvious, but many Arctic travelers have learned this lesson too late. Ice conducts heat approximately 25 times more efficiently than air, meaning it will pull warmth from your body with remarkable speed. Direct contact with ice can lower your core temperature to dangerous levels within hours, even if the rest of your body feels adequately covered. You might fall asleep feeling merely uncomfortable and never wake up, which would make for an extremely poor Yelp review of your Arctic accommodations. The solution begins with elevation. Traditional sleep platforms rise above the shelter floor, whether built from snow blocks in igloos or wooden structures in permanent dwellings. This simple height difference uses a basic law of physics. Warm air rises. Even a few inches of elevation places the sleeper in a warmer air layer. Inside an igloo, the temperature variation between floor level and raised platform can reach 15 degrees, the difference between freezing and merely cool. After establishing height comes the critical focus on insulation. Any contact with cold surfaces, even through thick materials, will drain body heat through conduction. The base typically consists of arranged branches, moss, or available plant material, creating air gaps while providing support. This natural foundation lifts the sleeper while minimizing contact with the cold platform below. Atop this base comes the primary insulation: animal hides. Caribou skins prove invaluable here too, with fur facing upward to create countless tiny air pockets between sleeper and cold below. Multiple hides might layer for added protection. A particularly effective method uses 2 caribou hides with fur sides facing each other, creating an insulating air gap between them. The sleeper then rests on this double fur arrangement, drastically reducing heat transfer to the ground. For extra warmth, polar bear hides were prized when available. The hollow structure of polar bear fur delivers exceptional insulation, while the hide's density offers further protection from the cold surface. Modern campers dropping hundreds on high-tech sleeping pads with impressive R values are essentially trying to recreate what Arctic peoples achieved with materials that weren't marketed in glossy outdoor catalogs. Cover layers complete the system. Unlike standard blankets that simply lay over the body, Arctic sleeping covers feature semi-enclosed designs. Fur sleeping bags, often crafted from caribou skin, envelop the sleeper while maintaining a small breathing opening. These natural sleep enclosures trap body heat with remarkable efficiency. The design frequently includes a hood section protecting the head without fully covering the face, preventing breath from creating moisture inside, moisture that would eventually freeze and reduce insulation. Body position plays a crucial role too. The ideal sleeping posture is slightly curled rather than straight. This position reduces the body's overall surface area, limiting heat loss while allowing limbs to warm each other through proximity. Modern survival experts call this the conservation position, but in traditional Arctic cultures, it was simply the normal way to sleep in cold environments. An overlooked aspect of Arctic sleep involves timing and preparation. Nobody would ever go to bed cold in traditional settings. Creating warmth requires more energy than maintaining it, so people ensured they generated adequate body heat through movement before settling in. Vigorous activity right before bed might contradict modern sleep advice, but serves a critical function in cold environments, loading the body with heat at the start of night. Similarly, eating calorie-dense food before sleep provided fuel for the body's internal furnace throughout dark hours. The midnight snack wasn't an indulgence, but a survival tactic. Perhaps the only scenario where eating fat-rich food before bed counts as prime health advice. The sleeping space itself improves with use. In an igloo, body heat gradually warms the interior snow walls, creating a thin melt layer that refreezes into a windproof ice barrier, enhancing the structure's insulating properties. The longer someone occupies an igloo, the warmer it becomes. To a point. Internal temperature still remains below freezing, but might stabilize around 25 to 30 degrees Fahrenheit, which feels remarkably comfortable with proper clothing and bedding. Essential to this entire system is keeping everything dry. Moisture destroys insulation effectiveness, whether in clothing or bedding. Traditional practices include airing out sleeping furs during daylight when possible, using dry Arctic air to evaporate accumulated moisture. Even in extremely cold conditions, furs can be freeze-dried as moisture transforms directly from ice to vapor without becoming liquid. These sleeping arrangements don't just prevent freezing, they enable genuinely restful sleep, essential for survival in demanding conditions. Without proper rest, judgment falters, coordination suffers, and temperature regulation weakens. The sophistication of this sleep system reveals a deep understanding of human needs in extreme environments. Still, these impressive techniques address only part of the challenge. Beyond just shelter and proper bedding, the Inuit developed additional strategies that turned the bitter Arctic night from an enemy into a manageable reality. Arctic peoples discovered something far more effective: teamwork. When temperatures drop to terrifying lows, social distancing becomes a luxury nobody can afford. The human body constantly produces heat, approximately 100 watts while resting, equivalent to a bright incandescent light bulb. That might not sound impressive until you realize this heat factory runs 24 hours a day without stopping. During sleep, this output drops slightly but remains substantial. Why waste all this free thermal energy by sleeping alone? Arctic communities turn shared body heat into a survival multiplier. The math works heavily in their favor. Two people sleeping side by side don't just double the available warmth, they actually create a more efficient heating system. When individuals sleep alone, body heat radiates in all directions, with much of it lost to the surrounding environment. But when people sleep close together, the heat that would otherwise escape instead warms the adjacent person. The efficiency continues to improve with additional people. A group of 4 or 5 sleepers creates a microclimate that can raise the surrounding air temperature by 10 to 15 degrees compared to a single person. This might be the only context where inviting more people into your bed actually makes mathematical sense. The improved thermal environment makes an enormous difference in comfort and safety. Traditional sleeping arrangements in larger igloos often featured a communal sleeping platform where family members would rest side by side. Extended family groups frequently shared sleeping quarters, particularly during the harshest winter months. This wasn't merely about space efficiency, it represented a sophisticated understanding of thermodynamics. The arrangement of sleepers followed practical patterns. Children, with their smaller bodies and less efficient temperature regulation, typically slept between adults. This positioning protected the most vulnerable members of the group from the coldest edges of the sleeping area. Elders, who often struggle more with cold due to reduced circulation, might also occupy more central positions. Beyond just sleeping adjacent to one another, Arctic peoples developed specific clothing designs that facilitated heat sharing. Some traditional garments included oversized sections or attachable components that could expand to accommodate a second person, particularly a child. Mothers could keep infants and small children inside their outer garments using direct skin contact for maximum heat transfer while maintaining mobility during waking hours. The communal approach extended to sleeping covers as well. Large animal hides covered multiple sleepers, creating a shared microclimate under a single insulating layer. This method proves remarkably more effective than individual covers. The airspace beneath a large hide becomes a collective heat reservoir, warmed by multiple bodies simultaneously. Modern campers have rediscovered this principle with buddy blankets and double sleeping bags, though few realize they're implementing techniques refined over thousands of Arctic winters. Group sleeping also provided critical protection against a particularly insidious cold weather danger: freezing while asleep. When body temperature drops too low, the early stages of hypothermia can cause confusion and impaired judgment. A person sleeping alone might begin experiencing dangerous temperature drops without waking. In group settings, others would notice if someone began shivering excessively or showing signs of cold stress, providing a crucial safety system. The practice saved toes and fingers too. Frostbite most commonly affects extremities as the body redirects blood flow to protect core organs. Sharing sleeping space meant someone might notice early signs of frostbite, tissue becoming pale or waxy, and take action before permanent damage occurred. The simple act of tucking cold hands under another person's arm could prevent the loss of fingers. Cold weather cultures develop specific protocols for nighttime warming. If someone returned to the sleeping area with dangerously cold extremities, direct skin contact with a warmer person could safely restore circulation. This method avoids the dangerous mistake of applying intense heat to frozen tissue, which can cause more damage than the cold itself. The gradual warming from another person's body temperature represents the ideal therapeutic approach, medicine perfected through necessity. Modern Arctic travelers sometimes joke that the three most important pieces of survival gear are your buddy, and your buddy. This wisdom reflects what indigenous northern peoples have known for millennia. Human connection isn't just emotionally comforting, it's thermodynamically superior. The group approach to warmth conservation shines particularly during unexpected weather events. If hunting parties found themselves stranded away from permanent shelters, body-to-body heat sharing could make the difference between life and death. Historical accounts describe groups surviving blizzards by huddling together under whatever shelter they could arrange, maintaining sufficient collective heat to outlast storms that would have killed individuals on their own. This cooperative strategy carried psychological benefits alongside the physical ones. Arctic winters bring extended darkness that modern people rarely experience. In northern Alaska, the sun disappears entirely for up to 65 days during winter. The close physical proximity during these darkest periods provided emotional reassurance and community connection while simultaneously solving the heat conservation problem. The group warmth approach further reduced the amount of fuel needed for artificial heat sources. In environments where finding combustible material presented enormous challenges, maximizing free body heat made perfect sense. Every calorie of heat generated by metabolism and captured through proximity meant fewer precious resources needed for fires or lamps. The principles of group heat sharing remain relevant today. Military cold weather survival training still teaches the huddle method for conserving warmth in emergency situations. Medical professionals recommend skin-to-skin contact to warm hypothermia victims in remote settings. What Arctic peoples developed out of necessity has become standard emergency protocol worldwide. As impressive as these social warming techniques might be, they work best alongside another critical element of cold weather survival. Inuit survival depends on understanding food not just as sustenance, but as your primary heating system. The cold, hard truth about cold environments, they dramatically increase caloric requirements. Research shows that people living in Arctic regions can require up to 5,000 calories daily during winter months, more than twice what the average office worker consumes. This massive energy demand stems from the constant work your body performs to maintain its core temperature of 98.6 degrees when surrounded by air that might be 70 or more degrees colder. Modern dieters avoiding fat would quickly freeze to death in traditional Arctic settings. The traditional cold weather diet emphasizes precisely what contemporary nutrition often warns against: extremely high fat consumption. This isn't a cultural preference, it's thermodynamic necessity. Fat provides 9 calories per gram compared to just 4 calories from protein or carbohydrates. In an environment where every calorie matters, fat reigns supreme as survival fuel. Seal blubber emerges as the ultimate Arctic superfood. This dense tissue contains up to 80% fat by weight. When eaten, it provides a slow-burning, long-lasting heat source as the body processes these energy-rich lipids. A typical serving of traditional whale skin with blubber attached delivers enough calories to power significant internal heat production for hours. Meal timing takes on special importance in extreme cold. Arctic peoples consume substantial morning meals before venturing into the elements. This strategy loaded the body with calories when most needed for maintaining warmth during daytime activities. Another large meal before sleep provided necessary energy to keep the internal furnace running throughout the night, when the body wasn't generating additional heat through movement. Beyond caloric density, Certain foods create a temporary warming effect through dietary thermogenesis, the energy expended during digestion. Protein requires significantly more energy to process than either fats or carbohydrates, creating a short-term heating effect. Arctic diets balanced immediate warming from protein with sustained energy from fats. A meal of fatty fish provided both quick warmth from processing the protein and extended heat output from metabolizing the oils. Ancient knowledge included understanding how different foods affect body temperature. Specific foods were eaten for their warming properties before challenging cold exposure. Rendered fat might be consumed in larger quantities before extended outdoor activities. This wasn't simply caloric input, it was strategic thermal management. Hydration plays a surprising role in cold weather metabolism. Dehydration reduces the body's ability to regulate temperature efficiently. However, drinking cold liquids forces the body to expend energy warming that liquid to body temperature. Inuit approaches included consuming warm broths and teas that provided both hydration and readily available calories without the cooling effect of cold drinks. If grocery stores were organized according to Arctic survival priorities, the butter and oil section would be labeled central heating supplies. The Inuit recognized the temperature-regulating properties of dietary fat long before science confirmed the connection. A fascinating practice involved eating raw fat before sleep, providing a time-released heat source that would continue generating warmth during vulnerable overnight hours. Seasonal variation in Arctic diets reflected changing caloric needs. During the coldest months, consumption of fatty foods increased substantially. As temperatures warmed, dietary patterns shifted toward foods with lower fat content. This intuitive caloric adjustment maintained appropriate body heat generation throughout the year without causing overheating during milder seasons. Food preparation methods also served thermal regulation needs. Raw meat consumption, often misunderstood by outsiders, preserved precious calories that would otherwise be lost during cooking. Every calorie saved through efficient food practices translated directly into sustained body heat. This wasn't a culinary preference, but a sophisticated energy conservation strategy. Food-sharing customs took on life-saving importance during winter months. Inuit communities maintained strong cultural practices, ensuring fair distribution of calorie-dense foods, particularly during scarcity. Successful hunters shared with others, not just from generosity, but from the practical understanding that community survival depended on everyone maintaining adequate internal heat production. Some specific Inuit foods contain compounds that improve circulation, another factor in maintaining extremity warmth. Tea made from evergreen needles contains vitamin C along with natural vasodilators that help blood flow reach fingers and toes. These biological effects complemented the caloric benefits, creating a comprehensive approach to internal temperature management. Recent research has validated what Inuit people discovered through generations of observation. Brown fat activation increases with cold exposure. Unlike ordinary white fat that primarily stores energy, brown fat actively burns calories to generate heat. Dietary factors influence brown fat activity, with certain foods enhancing its thermal output. Inuit diets naturally included many of these thermogenic enhancers. A modern camper who packs only granola bars for an Arctic expedition has essentially brought matches to a forest firefight. The most dramatic demonstration of how vital dietary factors are in cold survival comes from accounts of hunger in northern regions. When food supplies dwindled, the ability to maintain body temperature quickly followed. A person could have perfect shelter, ideal clothing, and excellent sleeping arrangements, yet still freeze without adequate caloric intake to fuel the internal furnace. This understanding of food as the primary heating system reveals the sophisticated knowledge embedded in Inuit survival practices. The connection between diet and warmth wasn't merely helpful, it formed the metabolic foundation upon which all other Arctic survival techniques depended. Without this nutritional wisdom, no shelter or fur clothing would have been enough to survive the extreme temperatures. With the body properly fueled, attention could turn to preserving this hard-earned warmth. The Inuit still faced another significant challenge, simply breathing without losing critical heat or damaging sensitive tissues. Every exhale in extreme cold represents wasted warmth, and every inhale brings potentially dangerous frigid air into the body. Breathing might seem automatic, and it is, but how you breathe in negative 40-degree temperatures can mean the difference between comfort and frostbite. The average person takes between 17,000 and 23,000 breaths per day, exchanging roughly 2,000 gallons of air. In extreme cold, each of these exchanges presents both a thermal challenge and an opportunity for heat conservation. The nose evolved as our primary breathing apparatus for good reason. Unlike mouth breathing, nasal passages warm and humidify incoming air before it reaches sensitive lung tissue. The intricate structure inside your nose contains specialized blood vessels that warm incoming air surprisingly efficiently. These vessels lie close to the surface, creating a biological heat exchange system. The Inuit instinctively understood this physiology, emphasizing nasal breathing whenever possible in extreme cold. If you've ever seen someone walking around with an icicle hanging from their mustache in winter, you've witnessed evidence of improper Arctic breathing technique. That frozen condensation represents wasted body heat and moisture. Proper cold weather breathing minimizes this loss. The Inuit developed specific methods to address this challenge, starting with breath awareness itself. One key technique involves breathing more slowly and deeply in extreme cold rather than taking quick, shallow breaths. Slower breathing allows the body more time to warm each inhale and extract maximum oxygen from each breath, reducing the total number of cold air exposures. It also produces less visible vapor when exhaling, important because visible breath is essentially visible heat loss. Fur-lined hoods play a crucial role in breath management. Traditional Inuit parkas feature ruffs surrounding the face, often made from wolverine or wolf fur. When properly positioned, these ruffs create a microclimate around the breathing zone. Exhaled breath warms the air within this space, which is then partially re-inhaled, reducing the temperature difference between outside air and lung tissue. The fur itself serves functions beyond simply blocking wind. Breath moisture condenses on the fur fibers instead of freezing on facial skin. Wolverine fur resists frost accumulation from breath vapor, one reason it remains particularly valued for hood ruffs. The small air pocket created inside a properly drawn hood becomes a transition zone where extremely cold air can warm slightly before being inhaled. The direction of breathing matters too. Inuit hunters often learn to exhale downward rather than straight ahead when stationary. This simple adjustment prevents frosting of the face and eyelashes, which can cause serious problems during extended outdoor activities. Frosted eyelashes can actually freeze together, temporarily blinding the person, a potentially deadly situation when moving through dangerous terrain. Nose coverage presents a particular challenge. The nose protrudes from the face, exposing it to freezing temperatures, yet must remain uncovered enough to breathe. Frostbite often affects the nose first due to its exposed position. The Inuit solution sometimes involves partial nose coverage, protecting the sides and bridge while leaving nostrils accessible. Hand movements also come into play. Briefly covering the nose with a mitten between breaths during the coldest conditions provides intermittent protection. Speaking presents another breathing challenge in extreme cold. Unnecessary talking wastes heat through both the breath required and the opening of the mouth. Inuit communities often develop nonverbal communication signals for use during cold weather activities, reserving speech for when truly needed. When speech was necessary, speaking in short, efficient phrases conserved heat better than lengthy explanations. Night breathing requires particular care. During sleep, breath control becomes unconscious, potentially creating problems with frost accumulation on bedding or facial tissues. Traditional sleeping arrangements often incorporated small breathing tunnels or positions that allowed exhale breath to dissipate away from the face rather than freezing on sleep coverings. The Inuit recognized an aspect of breath control that modern science has only recently confirmed. Cooling the air entering the lungs forces the body to expend energy warming it. Studies show that breathing in frigid air can increase metabolic rate by up to around 30% as the body works to heat inhaled air to core temperature. This represents a significant energy cost over time. By pre-warming air before it enters the lungs, proper breathing techniques conserve precious calories. Today's winter sports enthusiasts buying expensive heat exchange masks are essentially paying for technology that attempts to recreate what the Inuit achieved with a well-designed hood and proper breathing technique. These modern devices work on the same principle, capturing exhaled heat and moisture to warm incoming air, but rarely match the elegant efficiency of traditional methods refined over thousands of years. Breathing management becomes particularly critical during physical exertion in cold environments. Exercise increases breathing rate and volume, potentially exposing the respiratory system to more cold air. The traditional approach involves carefully matching exertion levels to conditions, working hard enough to generate heat, but not so hard as to require excessive breathing that would counter the warming benefits of the activity. Children learn these breathing techniques early in Inuit communities, often through observation and gentle correction rather than formal instruction. Small adjustments to breathing patterns become habitual through daily practice, eventually becoming second nature. By adulthood, proper cold weather breathing becomes as automatic as the breath itself. Beyond heat conservation, controlled breathing serves another purpose in extreme environments: maintaining calm. Panic or anxiety triggers rapid, shallow breathing, exactly the wrong pattern for cold weather. By maintaining slow, measured breathing, the Inuit simultaneously conserve heat and maintain the mental clarity essential for survival in challenging conditions. These breathing techniques represent another layer of the comprehensive Inuit approach to cold weather survival. While each individual method, proper shelters, clothing, group strategies, diet, and breath control, provided significant benefits, their true power emerged when used together as an integrated system. This holistic approach allowed the Inuit to not merely survive, but thrive in environments that would quickly prove fatal to the unprepared. The physical techniques of survival matter enormously, but equally important is the mental approach to extreme environments. Beyond the practical mechanics of staying warm without fire lies something perhaps even more valuable. No survival system is perfect. Even with generations of accumulated wisdom and flawlessly executed techniques, Arctic environments occasionally create situations that push human endurance to its limits. The Inuit developed specific emergency responses for when prevention strategies failed and people faced genuine cold-related emergencies. Speed becomes the decisive factor when someone shows signs of dangerous cold exposure. Unlike many other emergency situations where deliberate, cautious action matters most, cold emergencies demand immediate intervention. Every minute counts when body temperature begins dropping below safe levels. The Inuit recognized early warning signs long before modern medicine formally identified them, and their response protocols emphasized urgency above all else. Frostbite, the freezing of skin and underlying tissues, presents one of the most common cold emergencies. Inuit emergency treatment for frostbitten extremities differs significantly from what many modern wilderness manuals recommend. While contemporary advice often suggests gradual warming to prevent tissue damage, the Inuit traditionally use body heat for rapid rewarming. A frostbitten hand might be placed directly against the warm skin of a companion's stomach or armpit, providing immediate heat transfer to the affected area. Nothing establishes friendship quite like having someone else's frozen toes pressed against your warm belly. This direct body-to-body warming method bypasses the need for external heat sources and delivers warmth precisely where needed most. The Inuit understood that the damage from frostbite comes not just from the freezing itself, but from how long tissue remains frozen. Their emergency practices prioritized rapid response over comfort or modesty. Beyond frostbite, the more serious condition of general hypothermia requires comprehensive intervention. Hypothermia occurs when the body's core temperature drops below 95 degrees Fahrenheit, leading to impaired brain function, weakened muscles, and eventually death if untreated. Recognizing early hypothermia proves challenging because the affected person often doesn't realize their mental function has become compromised. Inuit communities trained everyone to watch for subtle behavioral changes that signal dropping body temperature: unusual quietness, fumbling with simple tasks, or slurred speech. The Inuit emergency response to hypothermia worked as a group effort. Multiple people would immediately stop all other activities to address the situation. First came rapid shelter creation if the group was traveling. Even a small snow wall to block wind could significantly slow heat loss, while more substantial protection was arranged. Next came clothing adjustment, removing any wet garments that accelerated cooling and replacing them with dry items, often donated on the spot by other group members. One dangerous aspect of hypothermia that the Inuit recognized long before modern medicine documented it: paradoxical undressing. In moderate to severe hypothermia, confused victims often feel hot rather than cold and may attempt to remove clothing. This deadly impulse results from cold-affected brain function and failing peripheral circulation, creating a false sensation of overheating. Inuit emergency protocols included physically preventing hypothermic individuals from removing protective layers, even if they insisted they were too warm. A key sign someone is dangerously cold. They start stripping off clothes while standing in a blizzard and insisting it feels like summer. When the brain gets too cold, it starts making terrible decisions, like thinking naked snowbathing sounds refreshing. This counterintuitive behavior remains one of the most misunderstood aspects of hypothermia even today. Rubbing and friction emergency techniques helped address early stages of cold injury. For numbed extremities not yet fully frostbitten, vigorous rubbing restored circulation. However, the Inuit knew to avoid rubbing already frozen tissue, which could cause mechanical damage to ice crystal-filled cells. This nuanced approach, knowing when friction helps and when it harms, reveals sophisticated understanding of cold injuries long before the underlying mechanisms were scientifically explained. Emergency vapor barriers from animal intestines or stomachs could be quickly fashioned into windproof layers in dire situations. These materials, often carried by hunters specifically for emergencies, could be wrapped around frostbitten limbs or used as emergency outer coverings. The material's natural waterproof properties made it invaluable for preventing further heat loss, especially when regular clothing had become compromised by moisture or damage. For individuals found already severely affected by cold, the Inuit sometimes employed a graduated rewarming approach. Rather than exposing the person to full warmth immediately, which could trigger dangerous circulatory responses, they would progressively increase warmth exposure. This technique, starting with warming the core while leaving extremities cool, then gradually extending warmth outward, anticipated modern medical understanding of rewarming shock by centuries. Perhaps most impressive was the Inuit approach to psychological first aid during cold emergencies. Calm, reassuring communication combined with clear direction helped prevent panic that would increase metabolic waste and potentially worsen the situation. The emergency responders would often use rhythmic, measured speech patterns that both conveyed necessary information and helped regulate the breathing of the affected person. These emergency protocols represented the final safety net in the comprehensive Inuit approach to cold survival. While prevention through proper shelter, clothing, group warmth, diet, and breathing techniques remained the primary strategy, the emergency responses ensured that even when prevention failed, people had a chance at survival. The world changes constantly, even in the seemingly timeless Arctic. What remains to be seen is how traditions evolve when faced with new realities. The question inevitably arises. With snowmobiles, central heating, and Gore-Tex now widely available in the Arctic, do the Inuit still use these traditional warming methods? The answer is both yes and no, representing a fascinating blend of ancient wisdom and contemporary adaptation. Today's Arctic communities exist in a state of transition, with the younger generations growing up in modern houses while still learning traditional land skills from their elders. Many Inuit families maintain dual warming systems, conventional heating in permanent homes while preserving traditional techniques for hunting trips, emergencies, and cultural preservation. Snowmobiles have largely replaced dog sleds for transportation across snow and ice. These machines offer tremendous advantages in speed and carrying capacity, allowing hunters to travel farther in less time. However, they introduce new cold weather challenges. Unlike dogs, machines don't generate body heat and will leave you stranded if they break down. This technological shift has prompted modifications to traditional cold weather protocols, carrying more emergency gear, traveling in groups, and maintaining satellite communication devices for emergencies. Unlike a dog team, your snowmobile won't warn you about thin ice, find its way home in a whiteout, or keep you warm if you have to spend the night. It will, however, get you to the grocery store much faster. This trade-off between convenience and self-sufficiency characterizes much of the modern Arctic experience. Traditional clothing has undergone significant evolution. Many Inuit still wear caribou skin parkas and pants for winter hunting, but modern materials have been incorporated where beneficial. Commercially manufactured boots might feature synthetic materials on the outside with traditional designs and natural materials for the insole. The best modern Arctic clothing represents a hybrid approach, combining traditional knowledge about body heat management with newer manufacturing techniques. Gore-Tex and other waterproof breathable fabrics have proven valuable additions to the Arctic wardrobe, particularly as climate change brings more freeze-thaw cycles and rain to regions that historically experienced only dry snow. Yet synthetic materials still cannot match natural fur in extreme cold. At minus 50 degrees, traditional fur clothing remains superior to anything modern technology has produced, a fact acknowledged by even the most technologically equipped Arctic explorers. The igloo, that quintessential symbol of Inuit ingenuity, now serves more as an emergency shelter than a primary dwelling. Few Inuit today regularly build snow houses for overnight accommodations, though the knowledge remains widespread. Modern portable tents designed for extreme conditions have largely replaced snow shelters for routine use. However, many hunters maintain the skills to build emergency snow shelters, recognizing that when modern equipment fails in remote areas, traditional knowledge becomes the backup safety system. Climate change has forced significant adaptations to traditional practices. With Arctic temperatures rising at more than twice the global average rate, ice conditions have become less predictable. Areas that were reliably frozen for generations now experience midwinter thaws. This new reality has prompted a revival of certain traditional weather reading skills alongside the adoption of satellite imagery and weather forecasting technology. Diet has perhaps changed most dramatically. Store-bought foods now form a significant portion of the modern Inuit diet, though traditional foods remain culturally important and nutritionally superior for cold weather energy needs. Many families maintain a mixed approach, consuming imported foods during routine daily life while returning to energy-dense traditional foods for extended time on the land. Health researchers have documented the metabolic consequences of this dietary shift. As processed carbohydrates replace traditional fat-rich foods, cold tolerance has measurably decreased in some communities. The high-fat traditional diet wasn't just culturally significant, but physiologically adapted to extreme cold environments. This realization has prompted renewed interest in traditional foods from both cultural preservation and public health perspectives. Education systems now work to integrate traditional knowledge with modern science. Young Inuit learn about both the physics of heat transfer in school classrooms and traditional techniques from community elders. This dual knowledge system creates a generation comfortable with both scientific explanations and traditional practices, able to understand why their ancestors' techniques worked so effectively through the lens of modern thermodynamics. Breath control techniques remain remarkably relevant. Modern cold weather masks used by snowmobilers and winter sports enthusiasts operate on the same principle as traditional fur ruffs, creating a microclimate of warmed air around the breathing zone. Many experienced Arctic travelers still prefer traditional designs, finding them less prone to icing up than their synthetic counterparts. Mental adaptation to cold continues to distinguish those raised in Arctic environments from visitors. The psychological comfort with cold conditions remains a cultural strength, though some elders express concern that younger generations spending more time indoors may be losing this traditional mental resilience. Various cultural programs now specifically aim to rebuild the psychological adaptation through guided land experiences combining traditional and modern approaches. Emergency response protocols have perhaps benefited most from the integration of traditional and modern techniques. Contemporary Arctic search and rescue operations combine satellite technology, GPS tracking, and helicopter evacuation capabilities with traditional knowledge about snow shelters, body heat conservation, and cold injury treatments. This integrated approach has saved numerous lives in remote areas where neither system alone would have been sufficient. The Inuit have never been opposed to useful innovation. Their traditional techniques themselves represented continuous adaptation to challenging conditions using available materials. Today's synthesis of ancient wisdom and modern technology follows this same adaptive pattern. Rather than simply discarding traditional methods or rejecting helpful innovations, Arctic communities have thoughtfully integrated both knowledge systems. Perhaps the most profound change involves the transmission of knowledge itself. Traditional techniques once passed exclusively through direct observation and practice are now being documented in videos, books, and digital archives. This preservation ensures that even as lifestyles continue to evolve, the hard-won wisdom about staying warm without fire remains accessible to future generations and to people worldwide facing cold weather challenges. The Arctic has always demanded respect and adaptation, from the first human inhabitants developing sophisticated warming techniques to today's communities navigating climate change and technological transformation. This principle remains constant. The future will undoubtedly bring further innovations, but the fundamental challenge of maintaining human warmth in extreme cold will continue to draw upon both ancient wisdom and new discoveries.